Hello everyone. In this lecture, I'll be discussing Raman spectroscopy. So far we had completed rotational and or microwave spectroscopy and vibrational and IR spectroscopy. In the molecular spectroscopy lecture series, the third type of spectroscopy that we are going to see is the Raman spectroscopy. Now, Raman spectroscopy is different from the conventional types of spectroscopy like vibration, rotation, and electronic in the sense that these three types of spectroscopies have predefined energy levels, and due to the transitions between those levels by the absorption of some energy from the electromagnetic radiation, we see a spectrum. But in Raman spectroscopy, that is not the case. We don't have predefined Raman energy levels. But what happens is there is some electric field which is applied to the molecule, and due to that electric field, there are some changes occurring in the molecule because of which there are some certain energy levels created. Now, Raman spectroscopy can be understood in two different ways. One is the classical theory and is the quantum theory. So in this particular lecture, I'll be focusing both on classical and quantum theory. Then we'll see an example of a molecule which can show Raman activity, and at the same time we'll also focus on what we know as the polarizability ellipsoids. We'll discuss how we can recognize whether a particular mode of a molecule, whether it's vibration or rotation, is Raman active or not. Okay, so let's start with the classical explanation of Raman spectroscopy. Okay, so let's say as I said, we place a molecule in a electric field. Now, whenever you place a molecule in an electric field, it has a tendency to get polarized. Now, what do we mean by polarized? Now, let's say this property is polarizability. Any atom or any molecule, when placed in an electric field, has a tendency to form two poles at the two, let's say, to split its charges in two different locations. Let's say you have a sphere of equally distributed charges. Okay, now you place this in an electric field and the charges split like this. So what is happening is a uniform distribution has now got split into two different poles. Now this is a dipole, or better say this is an induced dipole. So for a molecule to for the ability of a molecule to produce an induced dipole in presence of an electric field is known as polarizability, and polarizability defines whether a molecule is going to be Raman active or not. If there is an induced dipole generated, the molecule is going to be Raman active, otherwise it's not going to be Raman active. So this is the basic framework, or let's say this is the basic condition for a molecule to be Raman active. But how do you understand that? So let's say okay, so that means there is a dipole created. Let's say I am representing the dipole moment by mu. So any dipole moment is directly proportional to the electric field, and the constant of proportionality is alpha, which is your polarizability. This is your applied electric field, and this is your dipole moment. Now, whenever you shine some electromagnetic radiation on a particle, it has its electric field vector along all the three axes, right? So let's say E is equals to Ex, or E vector equals to Ei, Exi, Eyj, and Ezk. Now, for our simplicity, let us consider we are taking only a plane polarized light. A plane polarized light will have electric field vector only along one direction. So let's say that is my Ex. Okay. So if this is true, Okay, so before that, so if I have an electromagnetic radiation which has electric field along all the three axes, so I should be getting three different dipole moments along, or let's say I can break the dipole moment along the components in three components along the three axes. So what I would get is mu x equals to alpha x ex, mu y equals to alpha y ey, and mu z equals to alpha z ez. Okay, now let's take the consideration that I have a plane polarized light. So if this is true, I have only, let's say, electric field along x direction. So that means my ey and ez are 0. So my mu y, mu z becomes 0. So all I have, mu x is equals to alpha x ex. Okay, fine. Now we know electric field, or let's say the electric field which is let's say generated in the molecule, can be split into two parts. This is the maximum value of electric field, which is equal to the applied electric field. Let's say this is not the applied electric field, this is the generated electric field, and this is the frequency of the oscillation of electric field vector. Okay, not actually, so this is the frequency of oscillation of electric field vector, and that is represented by the sine 2 pi mu t. Now molecules are not static. I mean, they are not freezed in a particular orientation. They have internal motions, whether it's vibration or it's rotation. So that is represented by x equals to x naught sine 2 pi mu m t. Now let's say mu m is because of the internal motions. Okay, so if we'll use this later. Okay, so what do we get? So we have mu x is equals to alpha x. Instead of ex, I can write e naught sine 2 pi mu t. Okay, fine. Now let's focus on alpha, or polarizability. Okay, now alpha x can be alpha x can be, let's say, further split into alpha naught plus d alpha dx relative to x naught. Now why I'm doing this? I am just expanding using Taylor series. I'm just doing a Taylor series expansion. Why I'm doing this, I will come back to it. X plus d2 alpha dx2 relative to x naught, x square, and the higher terms. Okay, so I can expand the polarizability or alpha in Taylor expansion to get this. Fine. Now let's say, so if I am going to use this in this equation, what I'm going to get? Mu x is equals to alpha naught e naught sine 2 pi mu t plus d alpha dx related to x naught, x into e naught sine 2 pi mu t, and the higher terms. Now let's say we are ignoring the higher terms because they are not contributing much to mu x. So I have only these two terms. Now we'll see how we can put the value of x here and arrive at an equation which explains the Raman effect. So we have expanded the let's say polarizability in using Taylor series. And why did we do so? So as I told you, the molecules are not static, they are dynamic, and they are doing their periodic motions in using which can be represented using this formula. So when they are doing the periodic motions, those motions cause some change in polarizability. So if that motion so that a change in polarizability can be further expressed using a Taylor expansion. That is why we had done that. Okay, so let's move on with the fact that we had got mu is equals to alpha naught E naught sine 2 pi mu t plus d alpha dx related to x naught, and we'll get x naught sine 2 pi mu m t multiplied by E naught sine 2 pi mu t. And we have ignored the higher terms because they are not contributing, or they are not very much significant with respect to the change that is being brought. Okay, so now using trigonometric formula, sine A sine B is simply half cos A minus B minus cos A plus B. So I am going to split this term So let's say I get the half out. So I will have cos 2 pi mu m minus mu t minus cos 2 pi mu m plus mu t. I open the bracket. So I'll have okay. Okay. So this expression gives some explanation to the Raman effect that you are seeing. So let's say you have a molecule or you have a substance and you provide electromagnetic radiation. Most of it goes let's say undeflected, some of which is scattered. Now those which are scattered are the result of Raman effect, or let's say we are using Raman effect to explain that scattering, and those which are undeflected are Rayleigh lines. Now let's consider in this case that these rays did not interact with the molecule or with the substance, but these interacted, and how you are going to explain this. So let's say because of the periodic motion or internal motions of the molecule, you don't find any change in the polarizability. This is the change in polarizability with respect to distance or with respect to equilibrium position. So that would mean if this is equals to 0, both of these part becomes equals to 0. That means you are only left with this one. Now this is the Rayleigh lines, which are these that you are going to see. So that would mean that in these cases there is no interaction occurring with the molecule, there is no change in polarizability, and because of which those are the undeflected let's say undeflected part of the electromagnetic radiation which you shine on the molecule or the matter. But at the same time, let's say if this is not equals to 0, then both of these will have some contribution, and these are those scattered lights. Okay, so that would mean you have one part which has, you have one component which has frequency less, and you have one component which has frequency higher than the one which you incident on the molecule, on the matter. So that means if you have a 0, which is this, you will have one value which is less than this, you will have one value which is greater than this. So let's say this is your Rayleigh line, and the lines which are before Rayleigh lines are known as Stokes line, and those which are after Rayleigh line are known as anti-Stokes line. Okay, so that means these are Stokes, these are anti-Stokes. This should have been a negative sign. Okay, fine. So okay, fine. So we have been able to get to some satisfactory explanation of why polarizability is occurring, why that polarizability is interacting with matter, and what change it is going to show, and how that comes up or how that matches with the results that we get. So the results that we get is that we have certain peaks on the left hand side of the Rayleigh line and certain peaks on the right hand side of the Rayleigh line. Okay, these are Stokes, these are anti-Stokes. Okay, so that means you don't want this to be 0. We'll look at the example of CO2, that what are the different modes of vibration in CO2 which makes change in polarizability 0 and non-zero. Okay, before that, so far we have always considered, okay, so let's say this is your selection rule for any molecule to be Raman active. Okay, now let's look at okay, before that, fine. So okay, now we'll look at the quantum theory of Raman effect. Now let's say in quantum theory we are considering, in classical theory obviously we have considered the wave nature of the electromagnetic radiation, wave nature of light, but in quantum theory we are going to consider the particle nature of light, or particle nature of photons to be specific. Now when will this scattering is going to occur? We have learned in a higher school about collisions, right? You have a ball here, another ball comes, it hits, they get deflected or they move in the same direction undeflected. So that means there are two possibilities whenever there is a, that means you are considering the case of collision of photons with the matter. So whenever there is a collision, there are two possibilities. It can be an elastic collision or it can be an inelastic collision. Now in elastic collision there is no change occurring in terms of the energy of the molecule or energy of the matter. But in inelastic collision, there is some change which is occurring. So if that is true, then that means this is the case of elastic collision. There is no change occurring in the molecule. That's why here the polarizability is 0. It is synonymous with this. And if the inelastic collisions are both Stokes line and anti-Stokes line. Okay. Now, if there is some exchange of energy, what are the possibilities? So the possibility is that, let's say the photon has energy mu1 and the particle has energy mu. So the possibilities are that after okay, so this is after the collision. So that means there is a possibility that this can be greater or this can be greater. So depending on that, you will get Stokes and anti-Stokes line. So let's say these are those frequencies which are observed by the detector after the collision has occurred. Okay, so if that is true, these have higher values of frequency. That would mean they have uh, gained some amount of energy from the molecule. So that would be the case of this, where the frequency of light after collision is greater, and this will be the case of frequency of light after collision is less. How? We'll see by making some energy levels. Okay, so let's say this is the ground state of the ground state of the molecule, and this is some higher energy level, and there is a virtual energy level which is intermediate. So you shine some light on the matter, it interacts with the particle, and this is excited to the higher energy level with a frequency mu1. After that, it comes back simultaneously, at the same time it comes back to the lower energy level with the same frequency. So the light which leaves after interacting with this particle has the exact same energy. So for that, mu incident is equals to mu final. So this is the case of Rayleigh lines. So there is no change in the energy of the photon. Let's take another case. So let's say you shine light h nu I. It takes the energy, does some excitation to higher energy level, but does not come down to the lowest energy level, but instead stays in a virtual level. So that means this amount of energy is only released with the photon which is being detected by the detector. So in this case, obviously mu I is greater than mu f. The only difference is this will be your mu f. Let's take another case in which the molecule is initially present here. It takes the energy, goes to the higher energy level, and then comes back to the ground state. So, and then this is released with the photon. So in this case, mu f is very much greater than mu I. So you've got three cases. In one case, the frequency, which is the final frequency of the radiation or final frequency of the photon, is higher, or let's say the final energy of the photon is higher, and the one in which it is lower. So if you had Rayleigh line at the center, for this case, you will have the final frequency lower to be before Rayleigh lines, and the final frequency to be higher to be after Rayleigh lines. So that means this is the case of Stokes line, and this is the case of anti-Stokes line. Now this general idea you can find in multiple books. I am taking this from Banwell. But the one that I discussed with respect to classical theory, that is not explained in much detail in Banwell. I have taken some study from some research papers and all, but I tried to present it in a simplified form. Okay, so we got that. So this is all about the quantum explanation or the quantum theory of Raman effect. Now, we have always talked about transition integral or transition probability. That gives you the selection rules. So since in this case there are two simultaneous transitions occurring, the transition probability will be let's say this frequency is u and this is v. So it is going from I to f, and let this virtual be some z. So you have this will look this is how the transition probability is going to look. I'll just I'm not very sure about the notations that I've used for the states, but it will have two components. That's the general idea. Okay, fine. So now let's move to polarizability ellipsoid. Okay. So for that, let's do a little bit of an algebra. We had seen alpha is equals to, sorry, mu equals to alpha e. Now, if we want, now we know electric field has electric field can be decomposed into three components along x, y, and z direction. Similarly, dipole moment can also be decomposed into three components, and likewise polarizability also. But if you want to represent them using matrices, what we are going to do is this is the matrix for the polarizability. And this. Okay. Our aim is to get okay. Now we have 9 different terms in the polarizability matrix. Now let's say our molecule is symmetric. If the molecule is symmetric, so if the molecule is symmetric, alpha xz becomes equals to alpha zx, alpha yz becomes equals to alpha zy, and alpha xy becomes equals to alpha yx. So out of these 9 different terms, 6 of them become, or let's say 3 of them become equals to other 3. So you have now total 6 terms. So this matrix will change to in which this is equals to this, xy is equals to xy, this one is equals to this one. So you have total 6 terms now. Now these 6 terms can be represented in let's say linear form rather than a matrix. Okay, don't worry about what significance these are going to have. This is not going to have any significance with respect to the exam. We just want to focus on the final result that we get. Now, using Cartesian transformation, we can further simplify this to equals to 1. I can rewrite this like this, and this is equals to 1. Now we know that x square by a square by y square by b square equals to 1. This is the formula for an ellipse where A and B are the minor and major axis. Let's say these two, right? Okay. Now, if this is true, for a 3-dimension, we get an ellipsoid, or let's say a 3-dimensional ellipse, as if you can imagine, is what is known as an ellipsoid. So I can again represent this as okay. So that means 1 by under root alpha xx is the semi-major, or let's say is the axis along the x direction of the ellipsoid. Similarly, 1 by under root alpha yy is along y, and 1 by under root alpha zz is along z axis. Okay, we have this is equals along, this is the length of the ellipsoid axis along x, y and z direction. So in other terms, the length of the ellipsoid is inversely proportional to polarizability. So we can write that means the length of the ellipsoid is directly proportional to volume, which is inversely proportional to polarizability. Or let's say if the polarizability along a particular direction increases, the length of the ellipsoid along that direction is going to decrease, and at the same time the volume of the ellipsoid is also going to decrease. Let's take the example. Let's say you have a sphere. Okay. And the ellipsoid for this is let's say like this, and you apply electric field and this gets polarized. So the ellipsoid is going to change to something like this. Along that direction, the ellipsoid is going to get squeezed. Okay, fine. So let's take the example of CO2. CO2 has 3 normal modes. It actually has 4, but I'm considering both the bending modes as 1. So let's start with symmetric stretch. Okay. Now in symmetric stretch, what is happening is you have a bond . So both the CO bonds stretch in the same manner, or in the same extent. So in this case, since the bond lengths are pretty large, the electron cloud is diffused much. The pi electron cloud is diffused much. And if the pi electron cloud is diffused much, the ability of that to get polarized is higher. So that means polarizability along this direction is higher. So that would mean the polarizability ellipsoid along that direction is going to be smaller, and the volume is going to be smaller. Now in this case, since the bonds have become shorter, the polarization is less, the polarizability of the molecule is less. So along the direction, the length of the ellipsoid is going to increase, and the volume of the ellipsoid is also going to increase. So what you will see is something like this. Now this is again a further decrease in polarizability. So the ellipsoid are going to just grow. So this is the case of symmetric stretch. Now let's take a look at asymmetric stretch. Okay. Now in asymmetric stretch, what do we have? this condition. So in this case, there is some polarizability of the molecule. Let's say this should be okay, fine. This is how the polarizability of the molecule is in a stressed state. Now in this case, both the bond lengths have become equal, so the polarizability has decreased a bit, or polarizability has increased a bit. In this case, the polarizability is less because this bond is really short. So the resultant polarizability of the molecule is less, that is why it has larger size. Now in this case, this is exactly the same. Now the problem is, if you go from this state to this state, there is no change in the polarizability of the molecule. So if there is no change in the polarizability of the molecule, you get del alpha by del x to be 0. This is a Raman inactive mode, while this was a Raman active mode. You are seeing a change in polarizability with respect to distance. This is not equals to 0. Okay. This is an IR inactive mode, but in Raman it's active. This is an IR active mode, but in Raman it is inactive. The final one is bending. Okay. So in this case, there is some polarizability of the molecule. Okay, now in this case, the polarizability is less as compared to this because the bond lengths are more or less the same in this case, in this case. The only difference is that the, let's say, okay, so the difference between this state in terms of polarization, the polarizability ellipsoid, is that if you see in this case, the length of the polarizability ellipsoid has increased. That means along this direction, the polarization has, the polarizability has decreased. Why? Because the bonds are now not along that axis. So if the bonds are not along that axis, if you pass my electric field along this, the polarization is not going to occur in significant amount along this direction, but rather in the other direction. But nevertheless, from this state to this state, you don't see much of a change in the polarizability. So that would mean del alpha by del x is 0. It is a Raman inactive mode. Which now this is an IR active mode, but in Raman it is inactive. From here, we can make a comment on the rule of mutual exclusion. I won't go in details. So rule of mutual exclusion says for those molecules which have a center of symmetry, IR active modes are Raman inactive and Raman active modes are IR inactive. And CO2 is a classic example of that. In CO2, there is a center of symmetry on the carbon atom, and the IR active modes, asymmetric stretch and bending, are Raman inactive, but the IR inactive mode, symmetric stretch, is Raman active. So this is an example of rule of mutual exclusion. Okay, so before we finish this lecture, one small detail. Let's take the example of H2 molecule. Now when H2 molecule is placed along the direction of the electric field, there is a net polarization which is caused along the bond axis, and as a result its polarizability ellipsoid will look something like this, because there is polarization occurring that particular bond axis. But let's say I am placing the hydrogen molecule perpendicular. So in that case, this entire bond is going to face the electric field lines at the same time, at the same extent, and there is no net change in the polarizability with respect to the displacement of the molecule, or let's say with respect to the distance. So as a result, the polarizability ellipsoid remains like this. There is a, let's say in case of del alpha by del x, this remains 0. So for homodiatomic molecules to be Raman active, they must be placed along the electric field direction for them to be Raman active. Okay, so by this I come to the end of the discussion on the introduction to Raman spectroscopy, their classical and quantum explanations, water polarizability ellipsoid, with a very small example. Okay, there are no questions from this part, and I can guarantee there will be no question from this part in context to NET GATE TIFR, because these are some very basic fundamentals of Raman spectroscopy on which we questions come on which there are more topics, more important topics like rotation Raman spectra, vibration Raman spectra, rotation vibration Raman spectra, combination spectroscopies, from which questions come regularly. But it is needed for you to understand what Raman spectroscopy is, and rather than just going to the topics and mugging the formulas. So I thought I'll do some discussion on the what Raman spectroscopy is and what are its theories. Also, I couldn't find much concrete or let's say compact, simplified material on the YouTube explaining Raman spectroscopy. So I thought let's make a lecture on that and this, and then move on to the other topics. So in the next lecture, I'll be discussing rotation Raman spectra, its selection rules applied to linear molecules and polyatomic molecules, and then also see the questions which have come previously. In case you have any doubts, any questions, difficulty in understanding any topic that I've discussed in this lecture, you can always put them down in the comments. I'll clear them in the comments as well, or if it's possible, in the next lecture. And if my lectures have been helpful, if you have benefited something from them, please do subscribe to the channel and hit the like button.